The night my parents celebrated my sister's college acceptance with cake and cheers. I was upstairs alone holding a test paper with a perfect score, and no one even knocked. That was the moment I realized if I wanted a future, I'd have to build it in silence. But stay with me, because this isn't a story about staying bitter. It's about becoming unstoppable. Lillian Reed was born 18 minutes after midnight on a Monday under a sky streaked with frost and silence. Her parents, Donna and Rick, were grateful, but not in the glowing, beaming way that new parents are in commercials. Their first words after the nurse placed her in their arms were practical, not poetic. "She looks healthy," Donna said, almost surprised. And then 3 years later came Sophie. If Lillian was frost, Sophie was fire. From the moment she arrived, Sophie sparkled in a way that drew cameras, compliments, and the easy approval of the world. Her curls were bouncier, her tantrums shorter, her grades brighter. At every parent-teacher conference, it was Sophie's name that made teachers nod appreciatively. Lillian didn't resent her sister, not at first. How could she? Sophie was just doing what came naturally, being adored. But as the years stretched out, the differences deepened. Lillian began to notice the quiet ways her parents showed preference, the glances, the gestures, the choices that added up like coins in a jar. Sophie was always driven to school. Lillian took the bus. Sophie got a tutor. Lillian borrowed textbooks from the library. Sophie's room was redecorated every birthday. Lillian's still had faded stickers from elementary school. She used to ask herself, did I do something wrong? Then quietly she stopped asking. At 18, Lillian had become an expert at being invisible. She moved through the house like a polite ghost, careful not to need too much. She cooked her own dinners when her parents were out with Sophie. She saved up from her part-time job at the bookstore to buy secondhand SAT prep books. Once she overheard her father talking on the phone. "Sophie's got the real shot. We're focusing everything on her. Lillian, well, she's independent. She'll figure something out." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't shouted. That made it worse. She remembered a night in junior year when Sophie got accepted into a prestigious summer program. The family celebrated with cake and photos. Lillian, meanwhile, had gotten a perfect score on her English final that same day. No one noticed. In the silence of her room, she wrote in her journal, "I'm not angry, just tired. Tired of competing in a race I wasn't even told I was running." School was her sanctuary. Her literature teacher, Mrs. Elliott, noticed the way she devoured novels and annotated them with sticky notes and quiet wonder. Once after class, Mrs. Elliott said, "You have a voice, Lillian. Don't let anyone mute it." She held on to that line for months, whispered it to herself in moments when she doubted whether anyone would ever hear her at all. She remembered her first college fair. Sophie had 3 meetings set up by their mother, folders, color-coded essays drafted. Lillian went alone, clutching a wrinkled brochure she had picked up at the library. No one asked where her parents were. No one noticed she had come by bus. She sat in a seminar room that day, the only student without a chaperone, listening to the presenter speak about potential, about vision, about rising beyond circumstance. She clung to those words like a raft. That night she walked home in the dark and scribbled, "One day I want to be in a room where no one wonders how I got there." She never voiced these thoughts aloud. Sophie was kind to her in the casual way that people who are always seen often are. Lillian didn't want to sour that. And her parents. They never asked. But Lillian knew the difference between being loved and being invested in. Love in her house was a blanket that covered everyone. Investment was a spotlight, and it never once turned her way. Still she studied, still she worked, still she dreamed, because there was something stubborn in her, something that refused to let their neglect define her limits. Something that whispered, even forgotten seeds grow if they find the light. And though no one saw her yet, Lillian was learning to see herself. By day, Lillian poured coffee and wiped counters. By night, she became a shadow behind a laptop screen, studying business principles and writing essays with fingers stained by espresso and bleach. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat, and Lillian had been there long enough to memorize every regular's order and the rhythm of the espresso machine. She didn't mind the work. It kept her moving, kept her from thinking too long about what was missing. At 20, most of her peers were in dorms or lecture halls, not balancing inventory spreadsheets while taking online classes during midnight breaks. But Lillian didn't complain. Complaints felt like luxuries she couldn't afford. She kept her head down, smiled politely, and saved every tip. But inside, there was a weight she carried, one far heavier than the coffee trays she balanced. At home, the silence between her and her mother had grown roots. Conversations, if they happened at all, were brief, logistical, clipped. "Don't forget the rent's due next week," her mother would say. I know Lillian would reply already halfway out the door, but sometimes there were words that dug deeper. "You're not like Sophie," her mother said once over dinner, not looking up from her plate. "You're not that kind of girl, the one who succeeds." Lillian had paused fork halfway to her mouth, the words sharp and casual, like a slap she was supposed to thank someone for. She didn't reply. She never did. She carried those words to work, to her classes, into her dreams. But it wasn't just what her mother said, it was what she didn't say. No questions about her classes, no offers to read her essays, no curiosity about the future Lillian was struggling to build. It hurt in ways she had no vocabulary for. She didn't tell Maya, didn't mention it in group chats. Instead, she wrote, "Dear Mom, sometimes I wonder if I'm invisible to you on purpose, if it's easier for you to see me as a failure than to face the ways you might have failed me. You say I'm not like Sophie, and maybe you're right. But maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's the beginning of something you never bothered to imagine." She folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her journal. She didn't plan to send it. It was a lighthouse for herself, not a flare for anyone else. One rainy afternoon during a rare free hour, she ducked into the bookstore next to her cafe. As she browsed the shelves, she heard a voice that tugged at memory. Lillian Reed. She turned. Mrs. Elliott. Her high school English teacher looked exactly the same, glasses sliding down her nose, cardigan draped like armor. But her eyes lit up as she stepped closer. "I thought that was you," Mrs. Elliott said. "You're taller now. And heavier with something. Life." Lillian laughed, surprised by the sound of it. They chatted for a few minutes. Lillian told her about work, about classes. She didn't mention the letter, didn't mention her mother. Then Mrs. Elliott said something that made her heart catch. "Are you still writing?" Lillian hesitated. "Not really, just papers for school." "Well, that's a shame. Because you had something. Not just talent vision. You saw through things. That's rare." The words hit like warmth in a cold room. Later that night, Lillian stared at her laptop screen. The essay prompt for her transfer application blinked back at her like a dare. Describe a moment when you realized you had to forge your own path. She thought of Mrs. Elliott, of her mother's voice, of the coffee shop, the silence, and she wrote. She wrote like her life depended on it. A week later, Mrs. Elliott emailed her. "I'd be honored to help you revise your essay. Don't lose your voice now, not when it's finally starting to echo." It was a simple line, but it made Lillian cry, real shaking tears. Not because it promised success, but because someone had seen her light, not Sophie's shadow. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. The first time Lillian stepped onto the campus of Easton Community College, she felt like an imposter. The buildings were low and practical, their bricks sun-washed and familiar, but the air buzzed with the energy of people daring to become something more. Lillian, armed with a partial scholarship and a heart still bruised from silence, tried to walk with purpose. She worked nights cleaning office buildings, weekends at the cafe. Her shoes were worn, her backpack frayed. She printed her readings at the library to save ink. Every dollar mattered. Every hour was accounted for. But in the small corner of a study room on the third floor of the library, she met Maya. Maya was studying chemistry, but her true gift was listening. They had met by accident, both reaching for the same outdated psychology textbook. It was awkward at first until Maya said, "You always look like you're writing a novel in your head." Lillian had blinked. Maybe I am. Maya grinned. Then I'm dying to read it. They became inseparable. Not in a loud sorority sister way, but like two vines quietly choosing to grow around each other. They shared flashcards, coffee refills, and late-night study playlists. They understood what it meant to feel small in rooms filled with louder, shinier voices. One evening, after a long shift and an even longer study session, Lillian found herself writing. Not homework, not scholarship applications, but a letter. Dear Mom, no, not you. Dear the mother I wish I had. Today I got an A on my econ paper. I wanted to tell someone who wouldn't brush it off or say, well, it's just community college. I imagined you smiling, asking me what I wrote about, offering me tea. It felt nice, even if you're not real. She folded the page and slipped it into the back of her journal. It became a ritual. Dear almost mother, I got the last shift again, but Maya brought me soup. We sat on the curb and watched the rain. I don't think I've laughed that hard in months. I wish you'd seen it. I think you'd like her. More than the grades, more than the shifts, it was the letters that kept her grounded. They became the quiet corners where she could place her pain without judgment, a space where she wasn't performing resilience but simply surviving. One night she found Maya staring at the stars on the rooftop of their dorm, shivering slightly under a blanket. Do you ever feel like you're holding up the sky and no one notices? Maya asked. Every day, Lillian replied. Maya handed her the other half of her blanket. Then let's take turns. You rest tonight. I've got it. It wasn't just words. It was a pact. And Lillian, for the first time, didn't feel alone. She kept writing. Dear one who sees me, Maya helped me fix my financial aid forms tonight. We high-fived after submitting them, then ate cereal on the floor. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like family. I wish you could see this version of me. I think she's starting to shine. And she was. Her grades held steady. She picked up a campus job in the admissions office. She and Maya launched a peer tutoring group, unofficial, at first just a few flyers and word of mouth. But students came and stayed. One evening, Maya read through her journal by accident. Or maybe not quite an accident. Lillian had left it open, just a little too obvious. This mother you write to, Maya said gently. She sounds like someone worth becoming. Lillian smiled. Maybe I wrote her into existence. Maya leaned back. Or maybe you're becoming her, for someone else. That night, Lillian wrote a new letter. Dear future me. If you ever forget how far you've come, remember this. You once wrote to ghosts, and now you speak to crowds. You once hoped for kindness, and now you create it. You were never the absence, they just never saw the light. And for the first time, she signed it. With love, Lillian. The idea came at 1:17 a.m. Lillian and Maya were sitting cross-legged on the library floor, surrounded by half-eaten snacks, highlighters, and textbooks threatening to collapse into an avalanche. I swear, Maya groaned, rubbing her eyes, if I have to search one more outdated flashcard set or scroll through another ad-ridden study site, I'll lose my mind. Lillian, half asleep and balancing her laptop on her knees, looked up. What if we built something better? Maya blinked. Like a study app. No, Lillian said, sitting up straighter. A platform. Customizable study plans adaptive to the student's pace without ads. A peer network that actually works. No fluff, just focused learning. They stared at each other. The air shifted. And just like that, a spark became a flame. They called it Pulse Learn. It started as a shared document, then a spreadsheet, then a prototype coded with tutorials, late-night trial and error, and every ounce of free time they could steal between work and classes. The first time they presented it to their campus's innovation lab, Lillian's voice trembled. Maya clicked too fast through the slides. But the faculty advisor leaned forward, intrigued. This has legs, she said. You just need to tighten your UX. Keep going. So they did. The following months were a blur of coffee feedback loops and redesigns. Maya handled the technical skeleton. Lillian crafted user journeys, writing every line of microcopy like it was poetry. Their big break came in the form of an email: "You've been selected to present at the State Student Tech Forum in Raleigh." Lillian reread it 4 times. "I don't think I've ever been this nervous about anything," she admitted to Maya on the morning of the conference. Maya grinned, adjusting her blazer. "Good, means it matters." The auditorium was colder than expected. Dozens of teams lined the hallway, some with matching shirts, others with 3D printed models or slick demo reels. Lillian felt their secondhand laptop like a weight in her tote bag. "What if we're not ready?" she whispered. Maya took her hand. "We'll never be ready. We'll just do it anyway." They were called up, a 15-minute slot, 1 shot. Lillian stood behind the podium, pulse racing. The spotlight made her blink. Maya cued the slides. And then, "Good afternoon. My name is Lillian Reed, and I used to study on the floor of a library because I couldn't afford desk space, let alone a tutor." Pulse Learn was born in that corner. Heads turned. People leaned forward. She spoke of friction points, digital gaps, the emotional toll of poor tools. Maya demoed their intuitive dashboard adaptive feedback community note sharing. "This isn't just a study app," Lillian concluded. "It's a toolkit for survival for students like us who don't have shortcuts or safety nets. It's what we needed, so we built it." The timer buzzed. Silence followed, then applause, honest, sustained, warm. Afterwards, as they packed up, a man in a navy sweater approached them. "I'm Raj Patel," he said, handing over a business card. "Angel investor. I fund ideas that come from the margins where real innovation lives. I think your fire's real. Let's talk." Lillian's hands shook as she accepted the card. Maya mouthed, "Holy crap." Back at the hotel, they lay on their twin beds, staring at the ceiling. "We did that," Lillian whispered. Maya laughed. "We did. For the first time, success didn't feel borrowed. It wasn't handed down or stumbled upon. It was built brick by unseen brick by 2 girls who had once only been given silence." The article came out on a Sunday. Front page of the local section: "From Cafe Barista to Tech Trailblazer, local student wins full ride to Ivy League University." Lillian's photo accompanied the headline, smiling a little dazed, standing in front of the Pulse Learn booth, with Maya, the conference banner, stretched behind them. The journalist had found them through a student innovation network. Lillian hadn't thought much of it. She had almost said no to the interview. She didn't expect her family to read it. But by Sunday afternoon, the texts began. From her mother, "I saw the paper. Congrats. We should celebrate." From her father, "Didn't know you were doing all that. Impressive." Even Sophie messaged, "Proud of you, sis. Always knew you were smart." Lillian stared at the screen. She hadn't heard from any of them in months. Not since the last holiday meal, where she'd sat mostly in silence while everyone quizzed Sophie about her new job and upcoming wedding. Now suddenly they remembered she existed. She didn't reply right away. She didn't know how. The scholarship had come after months of essays, video interviews, and letters of recommendation from professors and nonprofit leaders, not a single line from her family. When she got the acceptance letter, she and Maya had screamed, danced around their apartment, and then sat in silence, holding hands. Now she was being invited to drop by for dinner. She went. Not because she wanted validation, but because she needed to see for herself how it would feel. Her mother greeted her with a strained smile. "You look successful." Her father pulled out a chair for her. Sophie hugged her too tightly. The table was set with extra care candles, cloth napkins, the good plates. Lillian sat down feeling like a guest actor on a stage that once held her as a forgotten extra. They asked about the app, The School, The Future. Her mother's voice pitched with performative pride. "It's just amazing," she said. "We always knew you had something special." Lillian nodded polite. Inside, her younger self screamed. She answered questions with practiced warmth, the way one does at networking events. But her eyes studied everything. Her father's slight fidget, her mother's occasional glances toward Sophie, who stayed unusually quiet. When dessert was served, Lillian finally spoke. "I appreciate the invitation," she said, voice steady. "But let's not rewrite the past. You didn't see this version of me then. That's okay, but let's not pretend. There was a pause, a breath held across the table. I'm not here for applause, she continued. I'm here because I wanted to see if it could be different. I hope it can, but I need truth, not performance. Her father looked down. Her mother blinked. Sophie reached for her hand, but Lillian gently pulled it back. She stood to leave. The dinner remained half-eaten. Back at home, Maya was waiting with 2 mugs of tea. Well, she asked. It was like visiting a wax museum, Lillian said. Everyone looked familiar, but no one felt real. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She sat on the couch and opened her journal. Dear younger me, they saw your light too late, but you never stopped carrying it. You held it close even when it burned. That strength is yours, not theirs. You earned this table, and now you choose who sits beside you. She closed the journal and smiled. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity, and that was enough. The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Rows of blue caps bobbed like ocean waves as the class of graduates took their seats beneath a canopy of stage lights and proud families. Lillian sat among them, her cap pressed neatly over curled hair, the tassel brushing her cheek. Her heart thudded not with nerves, but with something deeper. Resolution. She had invited her parents, not out of vengeance, not to flaunt what they had failed to nurture, but because closure, she had learned, wasn't something you demanded. It was something you offered. She spotted them in the second row, her mother in a floral blouse, her father in the blazer he only wore for church. They looked out of place. Sophie wasn't there. Maya sat next to Lillian, beaming. You ready? Lillian nodded. Let's finish this chapter. The ceremony moved like a slow waltz. Honor cords shimmered, names echoed, cameras clicked. Then the dean approached the podium. It is my honor to welcome this year's student speaker, a scholar, a builder, a beacon for so many. Please welcome Lillian Reed. Applause swelled. Lillian rose. She walked slowly, each step deliberate. She took her place at the podium and breathed. The lights warmed her face, her notes trembled slightly in her hand, but her voice when it came did not. Good afternoon, she began scanning the sea of faces. I want to tell you a story. She paused. There was a girl who studied on floors, who learned to tune out the silence in her own home, who wrote letters to people who didn't exist because it felt safer than expecting love from the ones who did. The audience stilled. She wasn't chosen. Not first, not ever. But she kept choosing herself. She showed up, again and again. Lillian looked to the side of the stage where Maya sat. Their eyes met. Maya nodded subtly, and then she met people who saw her. Not for what she lacked, but for what she carried. Her fire, her stubborn hope, her need to build what hadn't been given. She let the silence hold for a moment. To those people, my professors, my friends, my chosen family, you didn't just believe in me. You reminded me that belief is a beginning, not a reward. Thank you. Her parents sat still. Her mother blinked too often. Her father crossed his arms. Lillian didn't mention them. She didn't need to. This stage isn't the end. It's an invitation. To anyone who's ever been overlooked, unheard, underestimated, you are not the absence. You are the source, the root, the spark. Applause broke, slowly building. She stepped back, heart full, not of triumph, but of peace. After the ceremony, her parents approached. Her mother offered a bouquet. You were powerful up there. Lillian accepted the flowers. Thank you. Her father cleared his throat. We're proud. Just wish we'd seen it sooner. She met his eyes. Me too. But she didn't linger. She hugged Maya, posed for photos with friends, and later that night danced barefoot on a rooftop under the stars. She had spoken her truth, forgiven silently, and walked forward with grace. Sometimes the cleanest closure is no closure at all, just a quiet goodbye. The auditorium was smaller this time, and she wasn't a student in the back row anymore. Lillian stood at the podium of Easton Community College, facing rows of students whose eyes reminded her of her own years ago, wary, hungry, uncertain. It was the same hall where she once took refuge on stormy nights, studying under flickering lights and whispering dreams into her notebook. Today she returned not as a student, but as a keynote speaker. The founder of the Unseen Stars Foundation. The idea for the foundation had bloomed quietly like most of Lillian's ideas. It started as a journal entry sparked by a conversation with Maya about the gap that still existed for students like them, the forgotten ones, the ones who studied on library floors, who carried dreams no one else invested in. If we ever make it, Maya had said, we build a bridge behind us, so others don't have to swim so far. They did. Unseen Stars was a small foundation, just 5 scholarships a year, each tied to mentorship and creative development. But for the recipients, it was a lifeline. The kind Lillian once wished someone had handed her. Standing at the podium, she scanned the audience and began. There was a time when I wrote letters to a mother who didn't exist. Now I write checks to students who do, who deserve to be seen before they become someone else's headline. Laughter rippled, a few nods. She continued, I come from silence, from a house where dreams had to whisper. But I was lucky. I met people who handed me mirrors instead of masks, people who told me I didn't have to become someone else to matter. In the back row, a girl clutched her notebook tightly. Lillian locked eyes with her for a moment and smiled. Success, she said, isn't about arriving. It's about reaching back, holding the door, sharing the flashlight. Applause followed her off the stage. Back in her apartment that night, cozy, filled with plants and books, and the hum of Maya's music drifting from the next room, Lillian opened her email. Subject line, proud of you. It was from her mother. Saw the article in the alumni newsletter. I watched your speech online. I get it now. You're the real deal. You always were. Lillian read the message twice, then once more. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she opened a new message to a young scholarship recipient named Aisha, who had just emailed in panic over her financial aid mix-up. Hey, Aisha, deep breath. You've got this. I'll walk you through it tomorrow. And remind me to send you that internship link. You belong in that room. With belief, Lillian. She closed her laptop and leaned back. The room was dim, the sky outside soft with evening. Maya poked her head in. Want tea, always. As the kettle boiled, Lillian stood by the window. She thought of her old room, the peeling posters, the silence, the letters, the aching need to be seen. And she thought of the emails, the speeches, the students she was helping shape. There were still days when the shadows stretched long. But she had learned how to light candles, and that was enough. The house was modest. 2 bedrooms, a sloped roof, windows that caught the morning light just right. It sat on the edge of a quiet street lined with maple trees, their leaves rustling like whispered promises. But to Lillian, it was more than a house. It was a choice, a declaration, a place where beginnings could unfold without apology. She had spent months searching for it, not for perfection, but for possibility. When she walked through its doors for the first time, she knew, not because it dazzled, but because it felt still, like it had been waiting for her. There was no grand welcome, no confetti or keys on a velvet ribbon, just dust in the corners and silence, and space she could fill. Maya helped paint the walls soft blues and warm grays. They thrifted furniture, repurposed old bookshelves, planted herbs in clay pots by the kitchen window. They debated over curtain colors and laughed over uneven shelves. The living room held mismatched chairs, fairy lights, and a growing stack of donated books. On one wall, framed simply in oak, hung a single sheet of paper. It was the first letter Lillian had ever written to her imaginary mother, the one she had scribbled years ago in a worn notebook beneath the soft light of a cafe, the letter that had begun everything. Dear version of you I wish existed. Visitors often paused when they read it. Some asked about it, most didn't. But Lillian always saw it. Every morning, every evening. A reminder not of pain, but of growth. A route she never forgot. They called the house the home of unseen stars. It was half joke, half truth. A place for dreamers who had once been doubted. a place where Maya hosted writing nights for local teens, and Lillian mentored scholarship applicants over tea and blueberry scones, a place where neither of them ever had to prove their worth. One morning, Lillian received an email. Another student, scared, struggling, brilliant, was asking for help. She replied immediately, offering resources, a Zoom call, and one message, "You're not alone." She kept a new journal now, not of heartbreaks or longing, but of moments. A student's first acceptance letter, a quiet thank you note from a mother, a night when the lights went out and they told stories by candlelight. One entry read, "We danced in the kitchen tonight." No reason, no music, just Maya and I laughing until we cried. This house hums with safety. Sometimes she would sit in the quiet and read her old letters. They no longer hurt. They felt like fossils, proof of what had come before, but no longer holding power over her. One winter morning, a package arrived. A small box with no return address. Inside, a mug, simple ceramic, hand-painted. On it the words, "You made it." Lillian turned it over in her hands. She didn't need to know who sent it. She just smiled and set it on the windowsill where it caught the light. Later that week, she hosted a dinner for new scholarship recipients. They sat on the floor, passing dishes, sharing stories. One girl asked, "Did you ever feel like giving up?" Lillian paused, then nodded. "Many times. But I kept a letter in my pocket, one that reminded me why I started." She showed them the framed one. The room quieted. That, she said, is the light I carried, even when no one saw it. In the evenings when the sun dipped low, she and Maya would sit on the porch steps, sipping tea, the warmth cradled between their hands. Neighbors passed by and waved. Wind stirred the trees. "Do you think we'll stay here forever?" Maya asked one night. Lillian shook her head gently. "Probably not. But the parts that matter, the foundation, we carry those wherever we go." Maya leaned on her shoulder. "Then we've already built the real home." Lillian looked out at the street. The stars were starting to show dim but determined. She had once believed home was something you had to be given, but now she knew home was what you claimed, what you created from scraps of hope and grit and dreams you didn't let die. She walked inside and paused at the wall where the letter hung. She traced the frame with her fingers, then whispered to it, "You did good. We're okay now." She turned off the light, left the room, and shut the door behind her. They never saw her light, but she carried it anyway, and now the world is brighter for it.